The time has come for a new revolution. Not a revolution of violence or control, but a revolution of the mind, the heart, and the soul. A revolution that will touch the hearts of men to let them know that they no longer have to pretend. This is a place where men get to be real, because in this space they can say exactly what they feel. So men of all races unite and come in. This journey will challenge you to look deep within. So now, let the new revolution begin, because it's time for a new conversation with men. Welcome to a new conversation with men, where our intention is to empower men to live extraordinary lives. I'm your host, Coach Michael Taylor, and joining me today is my good friend, Mr. Ernest Patterson, who is an expert in recovery, addictions. He's a coach. He is a commitment to empowering men. So I'm really glad to have you on the show.
Well, Michael, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh man, we're really this is probably one of the most important shows I think we can have, because we're going to be talking about addictions, and it is something that obviously is difficult for men to talk about.
Absolutely.
But what we want to do is we want to lay it out in a conversation, so hopefully we can enlighten some people that may be struggling with addictions. But before we get into the conversation, I want to give you an opportunity just to kind of share who you are and kind of what you do.
Yes, Michael. I am a licensed chemical dependency counselor, and so I work with adolescents. I work with families that's actually struggling with addiction. I've also worked with men that have struggled in the past with addiction and substance abuse, and they come in with all types of problems. I'm also a leader in the Mankind Project community, where we kind of really started my transformational work. So I'm really honored to be here.
So tell me a little bit about that. You mentioned your own transformational work. We all have amazing stories, I think, that sometimes we're afraid to share. I know I've shared several times, my experience of, going through a divorce, bankruptcy, foreclosure, dealing with addiction, and so forth. So share a little bit about your journey and how you got started in this.
Well, really what really prompted me to start, especially working in the field of addiction, is that I had my own issues in the past with addiction. Working with adolescents, I can really connect with them, because that's when my problems started, when I was an adolescent. Athlete all my life growing up.
Basketball.
As a kid, played basketball, went to college on a basketball scholarship, and one of the things I always wanted to become was an NBA basketball player. Okay. And during that time, I was heavily into drugs, and my addiction really was one of those barriers for me reaching my goal as a kid. And I got drafted by the Chicago Bulls, and when I went to camp, I was still heavily involved in drug use, and eventually I got cut. And I knew at that point it was time for me to do something different with my life and actually change. And I went into treatment. After I left treatment, stayed heavily involved in a 12-step program, and my life changed. And within that 12-step program, I met a really good friend, and he really guided me in the direction of the Mankind Project, and also I believe in the church, so I've also been heavily involved in the church. When I went to the Mankind Project, there were men there who really loved me. Sometimes the love was tough, and I needed that at times, and really helped me to really take some huge risk in my life to transform me, to begin me on the process and the journey that I continue to be on.
Yeah. Now, the tagline for a new conversation with men is empowering men to live extraordinary lives. And I truly believe that every man has the capacity within them to live an extraordinary life. One of the things that keeps that from happening are addictions, without question. And so I wanted to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about them. So I want to first begin by how would you, Ernest, define an addiction?
Well, one of my definitions for addiction is really being enslaved by some habit or behavior, some destructive behavior, regardless of the negative consequences that one have experienced. And just continue that process over and over and over again.
Oh, that's a good definition. Good definition. So we hear about addictions all throughout our media and society, and thank you for that definition. But I wonder if you could share with the audience, how do we become addicted? Is there a methodology behind it? How would you say that people get involved, or shall I say addicted?
Right. Thank you, Mike. I think that's a great question. One of my personal beliefs is that, you know, as a child, we're all born into this incredible world. The child is born into this world with their innocence, their beauty. You know, they are connected to a source or something greater than themselves. That's how a baby comes into this world. And, you know, babies love who they are. I mean, they put their feet in their mouths and they smile, and they love the very essence of who they are. And over a period of time, that particular child begins to experience some pain. And you know, the pain of life. And especially for young boys, some of the boys are being circumcised. And you know, that's painful. When the child comes into the world, he gets a little slap, and that's painful. The child begins to cry, and they experience pain as they're walking through their life. And parents begin to wound their kids. They say certain things to them, negative things to them, that they're stupid or they can't achieve, and why don't you be more like your older brother, and things of that nature. Coaches, as we can see in the media as of late, how coaches can be brutal sometimes, and some of the things that they're saying. So they go through pain, they get wounded. And after they pass from that stage, they go to a stage of fear, because the fear is they don't want to be wounded anymore. They don't want to go through that process of actually feeling that pain, so they actually feel fear of experiencing that pain. And that fear can turn into shame. And part of the shame is that they begin to believe some of those things that their parents say, that coaches tell them, that their teachers tell them, that they're, you know, that they're stupid or they can't achieve, or
I'm not enough.
They're not enough, and they begin to develop that internal shame. And over a period of time, you look at a kid that come into this world with this innocence. They they begin to experience pain in the world, and they transition to fear, where they begin to experience fear because they don't want to feel the pain anymore. And then the shame. They begin to experience that shame that they're not good enough, and they begin to internalize that. And then at that point, that shame turns into anger, or that fear turns into anger. And sometimes that anger is outwardly, where I like to say that that anger can turn into rage, where, you know, the
violence we see.
Absolutely. That's how it shows up in the world, because what other outlets do they have? They don't really have any other outlets. If you, like in my home, when I grew up, anger is not one of the things that was acceptable in my home. So where would I go to express it? Because at that time, you know, kids need to be seen, but not heard. So that's the message that I walked away with in my home. So I couldn't really express anger, and I didn't have healthy outlets to really express anger in a healthy way. So what I did was, my anger was turned inwardly. You know, and I had to hold on to it. And there's a lot of people that, when they don't have the opportunity to really express their anger in healthy ways, they turn it inwardly. And so from that point, when they turn the anger inwardly, sometimes it shows up as depression. You know, that when anger is turned inwardly, it shows up as depression, Or when it's outwardly, it's this rage, someone that just flies off at the handle.
Sure.
They get extremely angry, and I like to give the analogy like the immature warrior that takes his sword out and just slashes it, to anyone in sight.
Sure.
And after they move from that place of the anger, then they hold this shield up because they don't want to feel any of that anymore. They don't want to feel the pain, the fear, the shame, or the anger. They don't know what to do with all of that. So they want to begin to shield themselves from that. And that's really where the addiction set in. Because the addiction is really the shield that they hold up so they don't have to feel that pain, the fear, and experience that fear or experience the shame. Because if they can just numb out and take something to put in their body, and it's not just drugs, it shows up in pornography, sex, work, internet, video game. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Food, to really distract them or to just numb them out, so they don't have to feel what they're.
So that addiction is, as you mentioned, the shield that we're using to protect us in our minds anyway,
Absolutely.
From experiencing pain that we've already experienced before.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely.
That's a great way to look at that.
Absolutely.
And so we have to be willing to put that shield down, which again is very scary.
Absolutely.
We run the risk of vulnerability, and we don't want to experience the feeling. So then there's this vicious cycle that begins that we're hurting, but we don't want to deal with the hurt, so we put the shield up.
Absolutely. Wow. Yeah, and it's a vicious cycle, and it continues on and on and on and on, and it really creates a really destructive pattern in one.
So when we look at, for example, food addictions, we see people obviously that have literally no control sometimes over eating. And that's driven by that shield, that addiction of unwillingness to deal with something emotional, really, right?
Absolutely.
Is that kind of what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And food is a big one because we need food to really survive.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people that's struggling with grief or sadness, just pain on the inside, and that's how they deal with it. They'll go and eat and eat and eat, and they'll continue to eat to give them that momentary pleasure, or that momentary escape from what they're experiencing on the inside, to really help them.
And as we're talking about addictions, I know that a lot of people will struggle with the idea that work can be an addiction. And I know that I can speak from my own personal experience that work was my drug of choice. Fortunately for me, I didn't do drugs and alcohol, because if I did, I probably wouldn't be speaking to you today.
Sure.
Because I probably would have drank myself to death or something. But what I can honestly say is that there was a time in my life, and I really like how you talked about the anger leading to depression, because I didn't know how to deal with my anger. So I was always depressed and I didn't know it. On the outside, it looked the opposite. People saw me as the happy-go-lucky guy, but I was covering up all that hurt, all that pain, all that anger.
Sure.
It was just being repressed. So my drug of choice became work. So what I would do is, by being successful, it allowed me to feel good about myself, temporarily. Wow, look at Michael, he's the manager of this company. Look at Michael, he's done this, he's done that. So I was using all these external things to try to cover up how I really felt inside, which is pretty worthless.
Sure.
I felt worthless at times. And so this process of transformation for me was becoming willing to deal with the emotional piece, which was getting in touch with how I really, really felt.
Absolutely.
And so it was about removing or lowering that shield initially to allow people to see who I really am. And that's how I began my process. Now, there's also people that, a point that I want to bring up, because I think it's becoming epidemic in our society, is this whole idea of pornography and the internet. There's some studies out there that are saying, you know, some 40% of our young people are addicted to internet porn. And would you say that that's driven by the same thing?
Absolutely. I think that the internet porn, and what it does, it gives the individual an opportunity to just escape reality. Mm-hmm. And one of the issues around pornography and sex addiction, and especially the pornography, is that the pornography leaves such a powerful imprint, holographic imprint on one's brain, mm-hmm. that it can even alter the relationships that one could have with other women. Sure. Once they begin to actually see that type of hardcore pornography and seeing the sexual acts and the stills that they see, and then they try to be in relationship with other women, that it's not even a match. Right. And the expectation for their partner to be in relationship with their partner, the same type of relationship that they have or they're watching on the internet, yeah, it doesn't even come close.
Well, and also I would assume that it drives a sense of inadequacy, because they're trying to compare themselves to these guys they see on the screen. Absolutely. When as men, we all have our own, hang-ups about whether we measure up or not. Absolutely. And so you're watching this image all the time and you think that that's how it's supposed to be done, when in reality it's not real, a lot of it. And so it really starts to destroy our self-esteem, because we're trying to live up to those expectations of what we see on the screen.
Well, and just to really speak to that, especially about self-esteem, is that a lot of times, especially with addiction, when one does that, just one of the definitions is just being powerless.
Yes.
And one's life has become unmanageable. And so the powerlessness piece is that even when they try not to do it, they do it anyway. And when they do it anyway, it creates this shame and this guilt. Wow, I've done it again. Even though they probably tried to set up safeguards to where they would not do it, they did it anyway, and can rationalize why they did it, explain it away till it makes sense to them. It doesn't have to make sense to anyone else but them. And so they're good at that point. And then they'll engage in it again. And it creates more shame and more guilt, to where it's just vicious cycle, and who they are, the core of who they are as a human being, begins to really suffer.
And so, therefore, we have so many people in our society, because my belief is that we're so inundated with all of these images throughout our culture about what it means to be a man. In my first book, A New Conversation with Men, I wrote that there are 5 illusions of manhood. And one of those illusions is that to be a man, we must use sexual conquest as a gauge for manhood. And that, I believe, really drives a lot of this behavior also. Sure. Because as men, we're trying to get notches on our belts, because we've been taught that that's what we're supposed to do as men. Sure. So the reason that this conversation is so important is it becomes destructive. And when when you become powerless and your life becomes unmanageable, then you're in the grasp of addiction. Right. And what we want to try to do, hopefully, is if you're watching this program and you resonate with what we're saying, then we want to challenge you to say it's time to stop. So knowing that, let's talk a little bit about the recovery process. Because no matter how bad your life might be right now, no matter how addicted you might be to something, there is hope. Absolutely. There is hope. So let's talk just a little bit about the process of recovery. So we've talked about the addiction. So the first step, in your opinion, what should a person do is they're watching this show and they go, damn, what do I do? What do you say would be a good first step? Right. And thank you, Michael. That's a great question. And the first step is really admitting that one has a problem. Yeah. Because
if you can't really admit that there's a problem there, it's hard to make any progress, trying to actually recover.
Right.
And my experience has been when I see others that's willing to admit that I really have a problem, I've seen, kids, adults make progress in their life at that point. You said, one of the principle behind the first step in recovery, is honesty. And just being honest with oneself, it's so vital. And then from that place is that really getting the support and help that you need. That there are therapists out there that can talk to. There are 12-step programs. I think they're just incredible programs where I've actually seen, magic take place in those groups and those
Sure.
circles. And one of the statements I like to say is that to really see the impossible become possible, because I've seen how men and women have come into those circles and come into those 12-step groups and told the truth and really got honest about what was really going on with them, and the love and support that they received from everyone in there. The kind of the buzz, we call it a fellowship. And really the definition of fellowship is fellows in the same ship. And so they're in the same ship together.
Right.
And so that's why they're able to really connect with each other where others, may not be able to connect as well.
Well, I think you've touched upon one of the most important conversations we must have as men, which is that willingness to seek support and to find a support system that supports us in our recovery and transformation. And what I know is that this is extremely, extremely difficult for a lot of men. And women, actually, but this is a new conversation with men. But I want to touch a little bit deeper on that part about the support system, because you mentioned honesty. And if we're going to move through an addiction, we got to be honest. As you mentioned, we got to admit, first of all,
Absolutely.
that the problem's there.
Absolutely.
Then we got to get honest and sharing. But we have to have that support system, or the term we use sometimes is the container,
Right.
that will allow us to really be honest.
Right.
So can you talk a little bit about the importance of that support system so that people can get honest and real with each other?
Absolutely. I think one of the beauties about creating that safety, because it has to be safe. One of the very words of one of the 12-step program is Alcoholics Anonymous. Because it's the anonymity of that program, being able to go in other circles and sit in there. Because what I've noticed, because I sit in circles all the time. I like to call them circles, and I sit in them all the time. And one of the ways safety is created is that when someone else is willing to go deep inside their soul and share their deepest, darkest secrets, what it does is that it gives everyone in the group permission to do the same. If they see someone else willing to go that deep into their lives, they say, well, wow, I'm able to do the same thing. And so, it's the facilitators, the group itself. It really morphs into a place where people can really get honest and share. And that has to be created for one to feel safe enough to do their own personal work.
Yeah. And so I can't emphasize this enough, the importance of having that support system. I know that my own growth over the last 20 years would not have been possible if not for people like yourself, who are willing to mirror what I'm saying, but most importantly, just to be there for me. And I know that there was a time in my life when that was really difficult to do, because I had a real big issue with trusting people enough to open up like that.
Absolutely.
To say, look, man, this is me, and just accept me for who I am.
Absolutely.
And that's really what this work is about, us getting to a place where we're comfortable enough with who we are, and we can share it with the world.
Yeah. And Mike, even going a step further than that, as far as creating those relationships and the support, I know in my life that I have men that I know that I have great relationships with. If I believe if I call them at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, that they would answer my call, and if I needed them to be there or come there, that they would actually come. You know, if I just needed someone just to talk to or sit on the curb with me or just share some intimate things of what I'm experiencing in that moment, they would come. And I just think that's the type of support that we need. You know, there was a wise man told me months ago that, you know, with support, I can do anything. And I truly believe that.
Sure. And so with this whole idea of a new conversation with men, what I'm attempting to do is to open men up to the possibility of accepting support. Because I think too many times as men, we feel isolated and alone, and we don't know how to deal with all the challenges that we have. And so this new conversation is designed to hopefully open you up to the possibility that your life can be transformed. We're living proof of it. See, we're not experts that are sitting here talking about things from, you know, I've got a PhD in recovery. We're men that have gone through the trenches. And so what you want to do is you want to build a support system of people who are just as committed to their transformation as you are to yours.
Absolutely.
And so what this dialogue is about, you know, we started off talking about addictions and how destructive they are, but really, the message here is that no matter what situation you're in right now, there's light at the end of the tunnel.
Absolutely.
But first and foremost, you have to be courageous enough to move toward that light. There are men out there who will love and support you and challenge you through whatever addiction, whatever challenge you may have. And that's what a new conversation with men is all about. It's providing a resource that lets you know that you are not alone. Because I think that's probably our greatest fear, that we're all in this alone.
Absolutely.
And so I can't put a price tag on having people like Ernest in my life that I know I can communicate with openly and honestly and just be me. Not be judged. Not be attacked or criticized for my crazy ideas. Men that just love me for me. That's really what we all want. So we want to create support systems that allow us to have that experience. So, Ernest, I want to give you an opportunity just to share some words of wisdom for the man out there who's watching this show and maybe he's stuck in a dark spot right now. And what can you say to him, hopefully, that will maybe help him see some light?
Yeah. You know, first and foremost, just being willing to be vulnerable and say, you know, I can't do this by myself, because this is something that you really can't do by yourself.
Right.
You know, if that was the case, if people could just do it all by themselves all the time, we wouldn't need facilities, we wouldn't need 12-step programs. People would just use their willpower and just do it.
Right.
That there is hope. There have been many people, you know, that have had much, you know, deeper problems than I've had, and I've seen them pull themselves out of some really devastating situations and see a smile on their face. And no matter how deep and dark it may look right now, that it gets better. And what I know about myself today is that everything that I went through during that time, it's made me the man that I am today. Yes. So really, it was a gift. I didn't think it was a gift at the time. Sure. But now, as I look back at it, it's made me the man I am today. And so it was truly a gift, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful for my life, and I know that someone that's struggling right now, they hang in there. They'll see that, you know, what they've gone through, it's a gift to them, because they can share their experience, strength, and hope with someone else and give someone else some hope in their lives also.
And that's what it's all about, providing hope, to let you know that there is light at the end of the tunnel. And so, Ernest, I want to thank you, man,
Welcome, Michael.
for sharing your wisdom with us today on A New Conversation with Men. Know that you are loved.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
And that you are a gift to the world.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for having me.
All right. This has been another episode of A New Conversation with Men. I'm Coach Michael Taylor. I just want to say, I believe you're awesome. Now, all you have to do is realize it and know that you are. We'll see you next show. Take care.